Donald Trump did a town hall on Fox News, and it was about the disaster that you'd expect it to be. As we go through this, first of all, I like to remind you a lot, don't become desensitized. Remind yourself that this man is the leading presidential candidate for one of the two major parties in the most powerful country on the entire planet. Very frightening. And millions upon millions of people will watch what we're about to go through, or if they were to see it, they would react with a nod and a grin and proud of this wonderful leader. The stuff of nightmares, frankly, that's the case, that this comes off reasonable to a lot of people. Sheesh. But that being said, let's go through this. So many clips to go through. I'll try to do so efficiently. First, here's Trump with his normal obsession with authoritarian leaders, then getting to the statement of something to the effect of he thinks there was very little chaos during his presidency. Ridiculous.
Joe Biden, he can't put two sentences together, and he's representing us on nuclear weapons with Putin and Xi and all of these very smart people. The media hates when I say they're smart, but let me tell you, they're very smart and they're very cunning.
And of course, it's not a Trump interview or town hall or anything without him obsessing over how much he admires authoritarian leaders. And
I think he had very little chaos. I think most of the chaos was caused by the Democrats constantly going after me. And remember this. Remember that with phony Russia, Russia, Russia. I mean, if you look at Ukraine, 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 everything.
Okay, and then the normal stuff there. And after he says, I think you had very little chaos, you can just cut to your mind to January 6th. And for the first time in American history, a president trying to block the peaceful transfer of power, in Trump's case, through schemes like the fake elector scheme and pressuring local officials to engage in fraud and trying to get his vice president to just not allow for the lawful electors to be certified, etc. Very unchaotic, for sure. Then you get to Trump being asked to clear up some of his past statements. Here, Brett Baer is asking him, can you commit to telling your followers essentially that political violence is never acceptable?
In recent days, you seem to issue a warning that if in the courts, and even the U.S. Supreme Court, if they didn't treat you fairly, that maybe there would be bedlam in the country. Use that word, bedlam in the country. And in the last 2 days, at the same time, in the last two speeches, President Biden is focusing his campaign on the threat to democracy and political violence. Take a listen.
I'll say what Donald Trump won't. Political violence is never, ever acceptable in the United States political system. Never, never, never.
All right, so to Robert's question, this is clearly a focus of the Biden campaign. So can you say tonight that political violence is never acceptable?
Well, of course that's right. And of course, I'm the one that had very little of it. Take a look at wars. Again, I wasn't involved in wars.
He does say that constantly. I didn't start any new wars. So then do you give Biden credit for doing the thing that you said you were going to do, but didn't follow through on, and ending America's longest war, which is a step further than just not starting new wars? And also him saying there was very little violence on his side or on his watch or whatever. It's just factually the case, data-wise, that political violence is far more common from those who subscribe to right-wing ideologies than the same for left-wing ideologies. We've gone through the particulars when it comes to those numbers in the past. It's super stark, way more common, right-wing violence, that is, than left-wing violence. Then doing more damage control, or being asked to do more damage control, here's him trying to clarify his dictator remark.
I said, I'm going to be a dictator for one day. We're going to do two things. The border, we're going to make it so tight you can't get in unless you come in legally. And the other is energy. We're going to drill, baby, drill. After that, I'm not going to be a dictator. After that, I'm not going to be a dictator.
So you weren't saying that if the
and the press picks it up. So I said, I'm going to be a dictator for one day. They cut it. They go, I'm going to be a dictator. But they cut the rest of the...
Almost everyone reported that as Trump says he's going to be a dictator only on day one, which doesn't make it any better. He thinks that's solving the concerning nature of that statement, but it's not.
The sentence. No. I am not going to be a dictator. I'm going to manage like we did. We were so successful.
Okay, then going into that stuff. So finally, he's willing to say, I'm not going to be a dictator, something that, frankly, I don't believe one single bit. His actions and promises for a second term are much more important than him realizing just how bad all of this comes off and trying to do damage control. I do think he calls it a joke, even if that is a joke. I'm going to be a dictator on day one. It is conditioning his followers to believe that if there are things they find to be important enough, then those should go above and beyond democracy. So he's saying, I would be a dictator on day one because border policy and drill baby drill, even though oil production is hitting new records under the Biden administration, that is more important than a democracy. So being a dictator would be justified. I'm sort of kidding, but like not in just one little short period of time to get those things done. And it is, again, in a really subtle way, sort of conditioning his followers to start thinking about it in those terms. Certain things should be more important than our democratic process or not having an authoritarian leader. Then more damage control. He gets asked about his comment that went something like, if there's gonna be an economic crash, please let an economic crash happen in the next 12 months.
An economic shutdown. You said this week in an interview that if there's an economic crash, that you hope it happens now.
Yeah.
That you don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
I don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
You're not saying you're hoping for a crash, just to be clear.
No, I think this. I think the economy is horrible, except the stock market's going up. And I think the stock market's going up because I'm leading Biden in all of the polls. Every poll.
Okay. This is something he's been saying recently. Both that if something's positive, such as the stock market, then it's because people are expecting me to win, so they're so excited, and so things are going well. And the good economic metrics we're currently seeing, that's just because we're running off the fumes of the Trump administration. As I've said previously, the economic situation was a disaster when Biden took over. Now we've gotten back to a really strong economy. How would that be the fumes of the Trump? You handed him, given a lot of that was because of COVID and your mishandling of it, but you handed him, regardless of where you cast the blame, a really bad economy. Biden oversaw at least a recovery that outpaced other comparable economies in a significant fashion. And when you say the economy is horrible, which metric are you pointing at? There are massive problems, as is always the case, but the traditional metrics we use to judge an economy don't point to the conclusion the economy is horrible. GDP growth, unemployment, wages increasing compared to inflation, etc. All these metrics are actually looking really solid. So what do people mean when they say it's horrible? Not to excuse the very real problems that do still exist, of course. By the way, here was a video that the Biden campaign released of Biden responding to Trump saying that he'd just love to see an economic crash in the next 12 months.
When there's a crash, I hope it's going to be during this next 12 months. Because I don't want to be Herbert Hoover. The one president, I just don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
He's acknowledging that my economy is doing pretty darn well because he doesn't want that to continue. And by the way, the idea that he wants to see a crash in the next 12 months, doesn't want to be Herbert Hoover, he has to understand, he's already Herbert Hoover. He's the only other president who lost jobs during his term.
It is true. Again, lots to consider in why that was the case. I do think a lot of that is pandemic related and Trump's mishandling of the pandemic. But regardless, that fact is the case. And he's in the same category, jobs numbers wise, on that metric with Herbert Hoover, which he says he doesn't want to be Herbert Hoover. Then here's Trump trying to blame Biden for Putin's invasion of Ukraine.
Just take a look at Russia. I mean, Biden drove up the cost of energy. That's what caused inflation, but it's also what caused Putin to become rich enough to go and prosecute a war. And he never even talks about it. He's the one that caused that war, both rhetorically and by the fact that he drove up the price of oil to $100 a barrel.
So he says Biden's the one who started that war. He is more willing to blame Biden than he is Putin. And why would he blame Putin? Putin's so smart. Oh, he's so smart, as Trump will say over and over and over and over again. I will remind you of this. Forbes reports U.S. producers break annual oil production record in 2023, on track to continue breaking records in 2024, which, from the standpoint of the planet, is not a good thing, but is indeed something that flies in the face of this right-wing narrative that Biden made it his mission to shut down oil production in the United States. Maybe the reason for gas prices at different points in time is a little bit more complicated, post-pandemic related, Russia's invasion of Ukraine related, etc., than Biden turning on the high gas prices switch or shutting down oil production. Obviously, that did not happen. Then Trump gets asked about the House Democrat oversight report that outlines the millions of dollars that he received from foreign governments through his businesses while he was president.
Mr. President, before we wrap up this, there is this report, House Democrats, documents that say that nearly $8 million in payments to your businesses from foreign governments, China included, Saudi Arabia, while you were in office. They say Article 1 of the Constitution says you can't accept money from foreign governments while president. Would you pledge to divest from your business in a second term as other presidents have done?
So
that's what they're reporting.
I own hotels all over I don't get free money. Somebody rents a hotel room, et cetera, much money I gave back. In fact, I didn't have to do it.
Did you hear him say et cetera, et cetera? The et cetera is doing a lot of work. Or some people say et cetera. Yeah, so he doesn't deny it and he doesn't promise to divest. Obviously, he's not going to divest. But it's just wild. It's just crazy that Republicans would make this big stink about made up allegations that Biden was receiving money from foreign governments. Just not true. But did not be concerned at all with Trump actually getting money from foreign governments while he was president. It's wild. Then last subject we'll look at on the issue of abortion and abortion rights. I do think this sort of rhetoric, as we'll see, will really hurt Trump, rightfully so, in the general.
And Ron DeSantis, because you both talk a lot about pro-life, your record. And that's my number one issue and the cry of my heart is justice for all people. And I've been, vocal and celebrating with you all of your pro-life victories from the past. But then in this campaign, you've also blamed pro-lifers for some of the GOP losses around the country, and you've called heartbeat laws like Iowa's terrible. And so I'd just like some clarity on this because it's such an important question to me.
Okay.
I'd like for you to reassure me that you can protect all life, every person's right to life without compromise.
So that's a great question. I appreciate it, too. You wouldn't be asking that question, even talking about the issue, because for 54 years they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it, and I'm proud to have done it. They wanted to get it back, right? You wouldn't have that. There would be no question. Nobody else was going to get that done but me.
Yeah.
And we did it, and we did something that was a miracle.
It was a miracle. I saw that as the part that was quoted because of how much of America, a clear majority of America, definitely not considering the overturning of Roe v. Wade a miracle. And then we'll close on this, Trump once again telling this vile lie.
They're the radicals because they're willing to kill the baby in 8 months, 9 months, or even after birth. If you remember
Yeah. No matter how many times they repeat that, it's not going to be even 1% more true. The post-birth abortion things, infanticide, it's just a total lie. And then what they're doing with the late term abortions talking point is so vile as well. Because as we talked about, exclusively what we're talking about with late term abortions are medically necessary emergencies where the mother's life is being threatened, her health, a pregnancy has some sort of complication. That's what we're talking about. So already it's this tiny percentage of abortions, and 100% of that tiny percentage are medically necessary abortion. So then they're choosing to demonize a group of people who are already in a devastating moment, and they're trying to make it more devastating by restricting the necessary health care that they're seeking. And we've seen these devastating stories because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade and laws that have been put on the book since then of this taking place. Again, a medical emergency, and then they can't get the health care they need. Already, I'll say again, a horrible moment in a woman's life. And that's the group of people that they're choosing to demonize for political purposes, knowing that this made up story of, for fun, liberals going in and getting late term abortions or something is just that made up, but it's a good political tool. And so because of that, so many people's lives are being worsened. We'll wrap it up there. Sorry to end on that note. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel and a member at lukebeasleyshow.com/membership.